Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Jill. Got another video for you today. And this is an Into the Dark Multiverse Elite run on the EU server with my league Pony. And we set this up as a challenge run for ourselves. So the parameters of this challenge is that all the sub-bosses have to be out at the same time. And that your solo support roles, solo tank, solo healer, obviously solo troll as well. Basically the breakdown of the challenge is that you have to wait to have all 5 nth medals out at the same time. So Hawkman will be out and active. And then once you have all 5 nth medals, then you one by one let out the sub-bosses and have all the sub-bosses out at the same time before you can kill any of them. And then basically you just finish the raid at that point. So it's the reason why we do this. It's just we have this break in the content where we don't have a new DLC for 2 months. They've announced that it's not coming until April. So you have this stale kind of gap in between releases where, you know, we just have the Valentine's event that just came out. We might have like another seasonal with the St. Patrick's Day because that'll be in March. So when you have this type of gap between content, it really leads to the game becoming stale, especially for players looking for a challenge or not even so much even like end game players. Like it's not that these types of challenges, these types of raid runs are exclusive to end game players. It's just for people looking to push themselves and to strive to become better players. You know, when you have, you know, stale content, you're just running their content over and over again. Okay, we just did DME for the Dark Robins, and let's do it again, and let's do queue it again, let's queue it again. You know, you just don't have that same drive. You know, you wipe a few times on Lady Blackhawk and Peace at E because you're not paying attention. You're not fresh, where you're just kind of going through the motions, and that's what we don't want to have happen here. So usually they'd have some kind of event in the meantime. In the past, it's been survival mode. I'll touch on why survival mode doesn't really fit in the context of what I'm looking for in a moment. But the reason is that, you know, you have speed runs, like Pony's done the speed run in PZE as well. Now we're doing all the sub bosses out. Leagues like Revolution and Success have done 4-man runs of PZE. So it's just runs like this help you to keep the content fresh. So it's the same raid. You know, nothing changes with the raid. You're just finding ways to make it a challenge to yourself, to push yourselves to, you know, become better players, to try to become better. You know, it's not just that this is a hard challenge for the tank or a hard challenge for the healer because it's all the support roles. You know, you got to make sure that since it's elite, you only have 2 deaths. You have lots of mechanics going on at once with, you know, Red Death's tornado pull. You've got the orbitals. You've got the pools. You've got the drown debuff. You know, so there's a lot of mechanics going at once for the players to make sure they don't die themselves. You know, you've got the tank having to worry about aggro drops, pulling multiple bosses, Red Death teleporting out of range. So, it's, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces into a feat like this, or not even a feat, but, you know, like a challenge attempt like this. So that's what makes it hard. That's what makes it challenging. You can't have players that are just going to, you know, easily wipe and die and cause a death, because then it can complicate things later on in the run. You know, you've got to make sure that everyone's on top of the rolls. Like even in this run, we have 2 might DPS. Optimus is a might DPS. Nuke is also munitions might DPS, and then we have TRG Happy and Caillou is also a perk DPS. So you know, obviously you want to mix a might just for the splash damage. But you know, enough of talking about this. You know, the reason why I said survival mode doesn't fit into this type of challenge is that survival mode requires a lot of effort upon the developers to release. So you've got to program an instance, you got to program sub bosses for each one. You know, you can't just yank a boss from an alert or raid. You got to up the scale them. You got to make sure they actually work for, you know, either 4-man content or 8-man content, depending on what the devs are actually choosing to release. So you have all this, you know, extra effort upon the developers. Not only that, but you also have the style team because they have to have a whole bunch of rewards, you know, styles, materials, auras, pets. You know, you saw how many rewards there were for season 1. So, you know, you have the entire team effort to make survival mode just for something that's going to run for a month or run for 2 months. Like it's not practical. It's yes, that'd be nice, but at the same time, you also have a lot of things in DC preventing survival mode from being competitive in terms of like phase dodge, Amazon deflection shielding. You have, you know, nature balance issues, prec balance issues, you know, dual explosive shot balance issue, or not explosive shot, flurry shot. So, you know, you have all these issues preventing you from having a good survival mode experience or a competitive survival mode experience, which would have to be addressed as well, or some kind of fine-tuned. There's also the huge debate around 4-player or 8-player SM. So there's too much. I don't want to say drama, but there's too much involved with creating another survival mode. Should they have another survival mode? Absolutely, 100%. If we get it fine-tuned, we figure out exactly what they want. But in instances like this where we're in between DLCs and have these gaps, this is not what we need for actual content. What we need is to have something similar to an event that we can run that's going to provide some sort of reward, but also gives us that challenge, and that's also easy to make. So what I mean by that is it's something that players in the past have talked about. I think I've mentioned it before on the forums. At least I know I have. I know I've talked about it in the videos. But what the developers really need to do in terms of content is to have upscaled older tier raids. So what I mean by that is that every not every week, because that might be a bit much, but they could do every weekend or every other weekend. Every month, they have some kind of older tier raid just upscale to current CR levels. So if you had like a Kondak, and now all the bosses, all the ads are CR 311, you've got to worry about the Gatekeeper, and all that. You got Black Adam and all his phases of the back end. Same thing. Even if you take like Inner Sanctum and upscale that to 311 CR, you've got the Custodian. You've got his absorbing like the Doom armors, the Doomspin, all his things. You've got the Zeta drones on the second boss. So you have to have the tanks separate the ads, or they're going to heal it. So there's all these mechanics already present in all the raids. And the same thing, Brother Eye is still going to be difficult and requires group coordination with the lasers and getting the terminals. So it's really easy to have content upscale. You just, I can't speak from a coding point of view, but if you make it some kind of monthly instance or weekly instance, just like on the event tab where you queue up Kondak, but everything's upscaled. All they have to do is change the CR levels. It doesn't have to be beatable. The same thing. I'm not expecting every single old raid, if you upscale it, to be beatable, because there's a lot of mechanics in old raids that players aren't accustomed to. Especially if you look at the Outer Caverns, you've got the eye drones, you've got the Neuromax, you've got the wing armors. You try to Doomspin Prec TPS with their wing armor you. That's going to be a total GG. Even you've got the Avatar Attack and Brainiac and stuff like that from the other ones. You can go in the tier 3 raids. You can upscale like a FOSS 2 even harder into, like, if you imagine, we're used to like PCD and Dark Multiverse Elite DME. Try to do a Prime Battleground upscaled to 311 CR. You have to deal with the Avatar of Magic and Tech and Meta switching up between their phases, their mechanics, and Brainiac at the end, all in one instance. Or if you wipe and you have to restart over again, all 311 CR upscaled. That's no easy feat. So the thing, what they could do is have that rotate in the schedule, just like the Legend PvE maps. They just, this month is every weekend it's going to be rotating, the Bat Caves, the tier 2 raids. Those are going to rotate and be upscaled, and then the people who complete those will get source marks. It could be extra gearboxes. We don't need massive rewards for that. If they want to put like materials or trinkets in those end bosses, that's fine. Obviously no one's going to mind, but they could also just do that for source marks. Just have some extra source marks, or they can drop extra thin gear in marks or whatever current tier marks there are. So there's plenty of things that the devs could do. They could also put like Antimental stuff in there. If you run this upscaled CR content, because it doesn't have to be elite. That's the thing. It just has to be upscaled CR levels. So they can upscale it to elite, but even an upscaled version of the Batcave raids, since there's no regular event or elite version of those raids, they were just hard on itself. So Nexus and Paradox were the most difficulty challenge raids that we had in DC history. And there's no event version of Paradox Wave. So if they upscaled the CR for Paradox or Nexus or any of those types of raids, Darkside War Factory Elite, it doesn't have, well, the Darkside War Factory Elite was a bad example because it had event and regular versions as well. But, those older raids, like I was talking about, like the Bat Caves, like the FOSS 2, FOSS 3s, if those were upscaled, they didn't have different difficulty tiers. They just were, one tier. So it's just as difficult. Later, they came out with novice and expert, I guess you could say. But in the beginning, they weren't novice and expert; they were just added after the fact. But I'm kind of striving out a point there. But the point is that they don't have to have regular and elite. It's just basically upscaled CR. Okay, so we go into contact, everything's CR scaled to where we are currently with gear, and then you do it. So you have that as a weekend. You get some gear, you get some loot, you get some marks, and then the next weekend it's something else. So, if you don't beat the tier 2 raids, then once again it's not required. It's just something extra. It's just an extra event on top of it. And then 1 week would be this, or if they want to do every 2 weeks, then the next one would be the tier 3 raids, and then the tier 4 raids, and then the tier 5 raids, which would be Nexus and Paradox. They could do T6 again, which would be tier 6 was Lockdown, Relics, Artifacts, Labyrinth, Halls of Hades, Throwing the Dead. They could cycle through those raids. Like, we have so many raids in this game that players don't even remember. Like, once you do the CR skip or anything like that, you're not running, KCT, you're not running Olympus, you're not running Darkseid War Factory unless you need the styles or the marks or anything like that. You're not running Justice for All. You're not running, you probably still run Gotham City Zoo just for the Manbat Commandos. You're not really running the Escape or Pano's the comp raid. Threat Below was kind of useless anyway. Spindrift was kind of useless. And then we're getting to Hive and Machine, which is more recent. But, no one's going into Halls of Hades or Labyrinth. So a lot of those older raids, they're already CR skip past that, and they're just doing it for style marks, or they're getting the style from like the Universal Tier vendor. So there's plenty of opportunity to have a refresher for raids, because I'd say 90% of the community has never really run the Bat Caves or the Foss raids. They came in, either through CR scaling in the past, or the CR skips. So they skipped right by. Maybe they ran it once, or they ran it to get styles, but nowhere near are players used to even like Foss 2 and having the assassin to worry about and having his invulnerability. They're not trying to do a bridge run with all the assassin NPCs one-shotting you. There's plenty of things that they could do in this game. That's simple enough, at least from my perspective, to be able to do. It can't be that difficult to be able to do this. And that's something that would keep the community happy, would keep the community refreshed, because since it's not required, since you're not missing materials, it's something they can do each week. Just cycle it out. You get some extra marks, you get some extra rewards. You get that feeling of accomplishment that you did these older raids that were CR scaled up to current values, and it just keeps you interested. It's something the game can do. So that's my piece. If you got more suggestions on this kind of topic to keep in between DLC gaps, in between keeping content from becoming stale, or another way to revive old content, put that in the comment section below, and hopefully the developers see this. So thank you guys. Take care. Have a good day.